Hi, I'm Christine Dahlberg, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Governor's Council for People with Disabilities here in Indiana. I've been with the council since 1984, and so we've been around for quite a while, and the council represents people with disabilities. That's our primary constituency, and we try to advocate for independence, inclusion, and community integration, and work on trying to convince policy leaders and legislators and train people with disabilities and family members about their rights and about how to be advocates, how to be good advocates, and work with policymakers to get what's best for people with disabilities embedded in state and local policy. The council itself was established in the early 70s as an advisory body to the Department of Mental Health at that time. And since with continuing reauthorizations of the DD Act, it's gotten a stronger and stronger presence, and now we are an independent state agency, and we're broadly representative of people with disabilities, not just developmental disabilities, because as we found over the years, advocating for disability issues is a broad topic. And when you advocate, you don't advocate for people with a particular type of disability. Your advocacy affects everybody with a disability. And so that's why we have gotten that broadened definition, and including some responsibilities in our state legislation, as well as in past governor's orders for the ADA, and spreading the word about that, and getting good implementation done as far as recommendations of policies and issues that need to be looked at in regard to the ADA. So that's kind of how we got the ADA focus. There was a book that came out, I think it's called Toward Independence, and that was a National Council on Disability, had the first draft of the ADA. There were findings about people with disabilities and what their status was in life and their independence, which was pretty nil. And in the back of the book, as an addendum, there was a first draft of the ADA, and that's where the very beginning of the ADA started, was with the National Council on Disability. And this is my recollection. If there's somebody that has a stronger recollection, I may need to be corrected on some of the details. But that's when we first got involved, when we got copies of that information, and then we were asked by our because we're Developmental Disabilities Council, and there's one in every state. The organization that represents all councils with disabilities was asked to find point people in all the states to help spread the word about the ADA and get people activated. And we were lucky enough to be chosen. For Sue, I was lucky enough that Sue Ellen agreed that I could spend most of my time at that point in working on the ADA issues, because that was a huge job back then, and we were one of the point people in Indiana, the council was, to get out the word about the ADA as it was passing, the weakening amendments, what was going on at the national level, who to talk to, what to talk to them about, talking points. And I worked with P&A, Jay Steinhardt at the time, he's no longer here, and we developed, some materials that we would send out to people. It was really a very exciting time. Justin Dart was really something else. He was so humble, and so he gave away the credit for everything. He was known for his cowboy hat, and he uses a wheelchair, of course. And he was actually from a pretty wealthy family, and after his disability occurred, it kind of gave him a change of heart, as far as he's kind of a hard-drinking playboy type guy. And then when he acquired his disability, he really changed his life and got him into the advocacy scene that became the core of the rest of his life work. He was the chair of the President's Committee on Employment, and so he was a volunteer advocate. He wasn't paid, but he was appointed by the president to be the chair of the president's committee. And in that regard, he helped organize around the nation in regard to the ADA. And then later, he no longer was the chair, but he still worked with the congressmen and the senators and everyone else that was involved to help promote the ADA as an advocate. I don't know if you remember Costa Miller, who was the executive director of INARF. Well, he was on the board of the President's Committee on Employment, and he was the chair of the council at the time. And so through that connection with Justin Dart, who was chair of the President's Committee, and Costa was on the board, we were the primary agency that organized the rallies when Justin Dart came into town under Costa's encouragement, since he was the chair. So that was kind of the main connection. So our job was to find a venue and get it all set up and make sure all the advocates were invited and that there was sufficient room for them, and then even to try and get media coverage of the rallies and the information that was being presented and given. One of the things he used to do before he came to any state or any venue at all, he would say, okay, tell me the people who have been the disability advocates, who's been the ones that I should mention. And we say, oh, Justin, you know, you don't have to mention me, you don't have to mention, no, I want to mention every single person that you can think of that's been important to this effort. And so every time he would talk, he would start out by thanking dozens of people that are from the local and statewide that had been involved in disability advocacy. And he did that. That was kind of a trademark of his. And even in the written documentation, I don't know if you've seen some of the covers and the addendums to some of the things that were published during the passage of the ADA. There's a book with President Bush signing the ADA, and in the back you can see state by state all of the advocates. Those are the ones that Justin, and plus more, that Justin used to go, used to thank at every venue that he went within a state. He would thank all those people plus anybody else that somebody gave him a list of. And that was one thing that I thought was just so charming that he did that, and he didn't want any credit for himself. He wanted to give away the credit. Once the rallies were over, we knew who came. I mean, we had a list of everybody who came. And then when the work began on trying to rally the disability community in Indiana in order to get the legislation actually passed and making sure that no weakening amendments happened, which were happening, I mean, there were 1 million of them introduced. We had a list, which our speaker this morning was talking about. That's where you start. You start with your list in organizing. Then you know the people that are interested in the topic, and then you get the word out to them, and they in turn contact their congressmen and their senators, and that's what we did. That's what we used in order to get the information out. And you know, that was way before the internet. We didn't have the internet back then. So there was no email. We could not send this stuff out on email, which is so convenient today. We had to use telephone calls, mailings, and usually there wasn't time for that. So we used fax machines to get the information out. We used to have these broadcast faxes that we'd put in, you know, with 50 or 60 names, and then put another one out with 50 or 60 more names to get the information out on what the provisions of the ADA were, and what the best thoughts of the national folks were on what were weakening and what were to be supported. And people were really encouraged to then respond and write and talk to their own legislators about what they felt were the good issues, or the points that they felt that they wanted to support or not. I just remember being so excited that finally we had the law and finally it passed. The chair of our council at the time that law passed was Greg Farabach, who's a lawyer here in town, and he did actually go to the signing ceremony. He was there during that period for the signing ceremony, and actually witnessed that. I did get a red line copy of the ADA though, which is some kind of limited edition copy of the ADA that the National Association on Developmental Disabilities sent me for our work on passing the ADA. So that was kind of neat. And I got an invitation. I just didn't get to go. I wish I could have gone. That would have been wonderful.